It was mid-July, and it was 100 degrees outside. Not a cloud in the sky. It was hot for me, wearing a set of khaki shorts and a thick polo shirt. I had the brake guards go on water runs as needed, and guards were permitted to rotate by swimming in the pool. This was to keep them happy, and to keep them from dropping like flies in the deathly summer heat. Naturally, the cycles of the day began like any other. We delegated starting spots, and determined the final rotation based on the number of guards who had shown up, which was all of them. For that, I felt lucky. We had lost 35 guards from the staffing pool as a result of laziness and the usual number of kids who had life's events pop up. At our park, we had a slide that was about 60 feet high. This slide had 3 channeled slides that started off like a pipe, and then became fluted, half of a pipe, no upper half, channels. One pipe, and the most popular, was the one slide that went down at an 80-degree angle. It was completely open. You sat down, and slid down the 60 feet within 2 seconds. Quite a thrill really, if not a quick one. 2 guards manned the ride, one at the bottom and one at the top, to control the antics of the guests at all times. As midday comes around, I settle into the usual rhythm, occasionally serving as master arbitrator for the minor problems that our guests have. Bored, I begin watching the slides go down. 4 people come every 15 seconds, like clockwork, as they should. The technique is flawless on the part of the guards, almost robotic at times. If I were to approach these guards, they would likely be lost in their own world of thoughts and repetitions. At the top, I notice one of the guards turn around as a teenage male prepares to get into the slide. This is a problem. Teenage males are the trolls of the park, their antics a perpetual source of problems for all staff, from the lowliest trash kids to the upper echelons of management. Then, I see the kid take 2 steps backwards. I know what he is about to do. He must be stopped, I think. But, alas, what am I to do? I have no way to contact the lifeguard up top. There is no phone, no radio. I blow my whistle twice. The guards nearby look at me, the guard at the top turns around to find the source of my noise, to find me pointing at the kid. Too late. The kid ran and jumped clean off of the slide. Now, up to this point in my life, I had been afraid of things. Getting in trouble at school, failing something miserably. They all made me a tad anxious. A lot of things had made me scared, and a lot of things had made my stomach churn. But nothing, in all of my life, had made this scared until now. Seeing a young man fall to his impending doom and being powerless over it makes you feel terrible. Feeling, by some extension of logic, that you are indirectly responsible for this, makes it even worse. Never, in my life, has my stomach and jaw dropped so fast. To his credit, he assumed the proper position of arms and legs being crossed. But now he was clean in the air, flying like a lead brick. As he did so, his body turned ever so slightly. It was something he noticed, and fruitlessly tried to correct for. Instead, he fell some distance before hitting inside the flume and chaotically tumbling down the ride. I called the paramedics immediately, and we had to backboard this kid out of the splashdown flume. I worked at Raging Waters in San Dimas, California for a few summers in high school and college. Great job, walking distance from home, got to work on my tan, hot and cold running chicks. Anyway, this was the summer of 1987, I was just about 17. I was on lifeguard duty at the top of Dropout. Dropout was our huge slide that went up about 70 or so feet and slides straight down, no twists or turns, just straight down into a shallow slip of water. I'm doing my thing, telling people to lie down and cross their arms across their chests so I could gently nudge them over the edge. It didn't take much for me to slide them over, literally a slight tug was all it took. Mid-shift, out of nowhere, a group of 20-somethings get to the front of the line, must have been about 4 guys, maybe a girl, too. The one alpha guy of the pack tells me, "Hey, let me slide myself off." And before I could say anything, I was told by lawyers that witnesses heard me yell at him to get down. He hoists himself up on top of the horizontal platform of the slide, where one's supposed to lay down so I can slide them down, and takes a effing running hop over the ledge. I think what he was trying to do was a cannonball and land with his back against the slide. That's my theory. Like they say when something bad happens, everything was in slow motion. The guy got lots of air. I don't think he realized that the drop is almost 90 degrees down. In midair, he tried to self-correct his jump, his arms and legs wildly trying to feel for anything to grab onto. It never happened. Thinking about it as I write this, it was sort of like Wile E. Coyote when he runs off a cliff and for a split second or two, he hangs there in the air realizing he is messed up. Somehow, He free fell between both slides. Dropout has two identically slides about 2 feet apart, and hit every iron crossbar that held up the 7-story deck. Those aqua green crossbeams above the point of the drop on each slide weren't there in '87. If they were, the guy never could have jumped. So the guy falls 70 feet, hitting pretty much every steel girder on the way down. He lands at the base of the slide with just about every bone in his body broken, compound fractures everywhere. He ended up in a wheelchair for the rest of his life and settled for about a tenth of what he tried to sue for. Yep, the butthole tried to sue the park and me. Luckily, there were dozens of witnesses who saw and heard me yelling at the guy to get off the slide. It was also passed along to me by one of the managers later that he was royally loaded out his mind. Lots of near drownings and lost bikini tops at that job, but this dropout story is the one everyone wanted to hear that summer. I used to work at a small water park where there were some dry rides up the southern end. There was this 8-year-old kid just being a little pushing in line, climbing up the slide of the playground, knocking other kids' hats off, that sort of BS. I warned him several times then asked him to leave, but he doesn't. I go and ask my supervisor what to do and he says get the scissors. He means to cut his wristband, without which he can't go on any rides. I call him over, and he surprisingly complies, and before he can react, I grabbed his wrist and cut off his wristband. Naturally, he starts crying like a witch. He runs off to get his mom and she comes back about 15 minutes later and comes and talks to me, without her son. She asks why I did what I did, and I explain the situation to her, and how it is standard procedure. She nods and understands, and knows that her son is a demon child. She leaves, but, lo and behold, 10 minutes later here he comes. He tries to cut in line again and I stopped him, and asked him to go back to his mom. His first reaction was to punch me in the balls. Oh no he didn't. My supervisor sees and immediately calls security. Apparently his mom saw too and she comes running. She doesn't say anything to her child, but goes and tells the supervisor to scare him. When security arrives, 30 seconds later, they grab the kid, whirl him around and handcuff him. He's pooping himself at this point. They grab him and take him off in their golf cart. A few minutes later they return and the kid has obviously been crying, and hard. He jumps out of the cart and runs straight to his mom, who grabs him and walks out. People watching were stunned, but amazingly, and I kid you not, some applauded as they went off. Best day of work I had at that place. Operated rides for 4 years. 2 moments stand out. The scariest moment I had was when lightning struck a utility pole below me. My position on the ride was about 50 feet up, knocking out power to my right and forcing me and my supervisors to unload the ride in the middle of a lightning storm. The second was a guy who was very upset that I wouldn't let his kid who was a foot under the height requirement ride. I told him no early in the day, but one of my coworkers let the kid ride while I was on break. The family comes up later and the father, who was noticeably drunk, jumps 2 gates and over the tracks to threaten me with a knife. I called security and he ran. I don't work in a theme park but at Carowinds, an NC amusement park. They have this Halloween thing called Scarowinds or something like that. Employees dress up in these scary costumes and run around scaring the visitors. A big rule there is that you cannot touch them and they cannot touch you. This is the story of the time I broke that rule. So my brother and I were waiting in line for a kiddie ride of some sort, when out of the blue some guy dressed in a zombie/wolfman costume comes up and scares us. In fear I screamed and punched the guy in the face as hard as I could. He screams in pain because I had just broken his nose. Security gets called, they take my picture while the police and amusement park security talk to my dad and the injured employee. I can't much remember what happened afterwards other than telling the police officer what I did and having to say sorry to the employee. As of 2006 I am not allowed back at Scarowinds until 2016. Yep. This is what happens when you scare a 9-year-old girl, you end up with a broken nose and a hurt ego. By the way, I can go to Carowinds but my dad won't let me or my siblings go since the incident. I once worked at a water park as a lifeguard supervisor and it was an everyday thing that someone pooped or threw up in the pools. We even called it a code brown so we weren't straight up saying yeah, another turd in the kiddie pool. Another time we had a riptide water ride where people could ride bodyboards like a big wave and while I was talking to another guard I heard the whistle go off like there was an emergency. As I approached, a guard told me that there was a nail in someone's foot. I thought he meant someone stubbed their toe and their nail pushed back into their toe. But it was an 8-year-old girl who had stepped on a 4-inch screw left over from the maintenance the ride had recently undergone. Right into the heel. As I saw it I got a little lightheaded. I picked her up and pulled her out of the water. She moved her foot and it started to come out, but it was still in there a good 3 inches. I put a latex glove on it and told her it'd be okay, as I called for paramedics. Her brothers came up and said that she was gonna ruin their time if they had to leave, and I had to tell them to get away. When the paramedics came they picked her up to put her on the stretcher, and when they did, that good old latex glove slid off her foot, and got hooked on the screw in the foot, causing her, what I believed by her screams, excruciating pain. Never found out what happened after that, but she should have sued. Big payday. I used to work as a lifeguard at a small water park. The park was so small that during the week, some of our only customers in the first half of the day were day camps. About once every month we would get a special needs day camp. Why they thought it would be a good idea to take special needs kids to a water park, I don't know. Well, I'm at the top of our biggest slide, a platform that's about 40 to 60 feet tall with 2 slides, an open and completely enclosed slide. Anyway, we get this kid come up with one of the counselors. It's clear the kid can't really communicate, however he appears to be scared to go down. Since the counselors are familiar with the park, they want him to go down the open to the elements slide as it is much slower and less intense than the enclosed one. The kid is obviously reluctant to go down, so he steps out of line for a bit. Finally he braves enough courage to go down. However, the first few feet down the slide he gets stuck. He was kind of a bigger kid with a poor suit and the slide hadn't been waxed in a while. Normally when this happens people just push off the wall once and are good the rest of the way down. Being special needs and all, his first instinct is to stand up. Here I am panicking seeing a special needs kid standing up 40 to 60 feet in the air on a slippery surface. Luckily the counselor immediately reacted and slowly went down the slide, grabbed the kid, and together they slid down to safety. However, the slide is poorly designed to the point that I can't really see people at the bottom. I'm trained to send people down when I see the person walking on the sidewalk. It's sorta complicated. Anyway, me in my stressed out state, I see the counselor walking around, so I assume it's safe to send down the next rider. However, the counselor never thought to turn around and grab the special needs from the bottom of the slide. Before I noticed this, it was too late, and to make matters worse, the person I sent down was a 300-pound semi-truck who was hauling down the slide, seriously not exaggerating. This semi-truck of a lady literally plows through the special needs kid at the bottom. Luckily the kid was alright, but that was the worst day of my first year at the park. This story was the only true time I was scared while at work. We had a ride breakdown, surprisingly normal. However, the train was stuck in such a way that we were unable to reach 2 rows of the train. It just so happened that in one of those rows was a lady that was having a severe panic or asthma attack. Our first aid team took over when she got off, and couldn't calm down or get her breathing under control. Luckily Mom was nearby and had an inhaler. The ride was a flying coaster, so the guests were laying on their backs while stuck, and I was able to toss the inhaler and land it right on her chest. Between Mom, first aid personnel, and myself we were able to get her calmed down while we wait for maintenance to pull the train into place. The whole ordeal only took 10 to 15 minutes, but it felt like an hour. People stuck on rides always seem to think their lives are in danger when in reality they're safer in the seat than I am standing on the catwalk next to them. But this woman was the only time I felt someone was in real danger, and it scared the hell out of me.